Tonight's true scary story is one that I told on my TT a while ago. It's called Give Me One More Reason. I will tell you that this does have a trigger warning for self-harm and domestic violence, so keep that in mind before watching, please. We're gonna call tonight's submitter Hannah. Hannah used to live in Anchorage, Alaska, and the apartment that she lived in with her husband used to have a lot of activity in it before she moved to Texas. Now in 2009, Hannah had a friend named Janet. Janet was actually her boss, and they became friends when Hannah became second in command at her job. Due to some drama with another employee though at her job, and the higher ups were apparently unwilling to do anything about it, Hannah ended up quitting that job. It wasn't long after that Hannah went to art school online, so she didn't work. Now, Hannah and her husband had an unspoken agreement that whenever he came home from work, she would not have anybody over because that time was their time together. But one night, just as Hannah's husband is getting home from work, her friend Janet calls her and asks if she can come over because she just got a new car and she wanted to show it to her. Now, Hannah can't explain why. Maybe it was something in Janet's voice, but she asked her husband if Janet could come over. He said that it was fine and that he would just fend for himself for dinner, and he would just occupy his time by playing Call of Duty while Janet was visiting. When Janet comes over, she tells Hannah that she's not over there to show her her new car. She's actually over there because she needed to get away from her house because her husband had been drinking. We're gonna call her husband Jeff for the story. Now, apparently when Jeff would drink, he would become belligerent, and he had a history of slapping Janet around. Now, Hannah is very pro self-defense, so as hearing what was going on with Janet, she suggests to Janet that she ignore his phone calls because apparently he continued to call her. He was calling her over and over and over again. So she says just ignore his phone calls, and even suggested that Janet leave him. After this, Hannah and Janet spent the entire night talking. They were talking about girl power. Hannah was even talking about how if she was in Janet's position, she would knock him on his ass, even if she had to catch him off guard, stuff like that. Now, they had literally been talking all night because it was around 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning when Jeff called Janet, and she picked up the phone and then hung it up immediately. Did not give him any time to speak whatsoever. Now, Jeff continued to call her, and she repeated the same action, where she would pick up the phone, she would hang it up before he had a chance to speak, and around 30 minutes later, Jeff texted her and said, if you do not come home in 30 minutes, I am going to kill myself. Now, momentarily, this really shook Hannah. She was kind of shook out of her tough girl attitude, but Janet assured her that this was nothing to be worried about. See, Jeff had a pattern. Jeff would get drunk, he would get mean and abusive, he would hit her, and then she would leave. She told Hannah that he would then call her over and over again like he was doing. He would threaten to kill himself if she didn't come back, and this was just his way of manipulating her. Janet said that when he had enough time to sober up, he would apologize to her, she would then go home, and they would make up. With that being said, Janet asked her if she didn't mind if she waited it out at Hannah's house, and Hannah said of course, and encouraged her to do so. A little while later, Jeff calls again. This time he is screaming at Janet, saying that he meant what he said, and if that she's not home in 15 minutes, he is going to kill himself. Janet continued to say that Jeff was just manipulating her and kept reassuring Hannah that he was lying. 15 minutes later, Jeff calls back and he's screaming into the phone, "You effing bitch! I told you so!" And the volume was loud enough for Hannah to hear when Jeff cocked the gun. He then hung up, but Janet continued to assure Hannah that he was not going to do it, that he had done this before multiple times. They chatted for a little while longer, and Janet packed up her stuff to go home around 8 o'clock in the morning. So Hannah tells Janet, call me when you get home. She wants to make sure that she's safe. So she waits a little bit, and when Janet calls Hannah, she is absolutely hysterical. Apparently the last time that Jeff had called, he had actually killed himself. He had done it. Hannah then tells her, you need to call the police right now. You need to hang up with me and call the police, and as soon as you're done talking to the police, please call me right back. So Janet agrees. So Hannah waits for Janet to call back, and she does, and she tells her to stay on the phone with her until the police arrive, and she does. She stays on the phone until they arrive. She could barely hear Janet's voice. She could barely hear the voices of the police officers. She just stood there, straining to hear them. Now, Janet had put her phone down on the counter so that she could talk to the police officers, and Hannah was waiting for her to come back on the line. But while Hannah was waiting for Janet to come back on the line, she heard a song come over the phone, and that song was Give Me One More Reason by Tracy Chapman. She didn't have the radio on. Janet didn't have the radio on. There was no reason for a song just to come into the phone line for absolutely no reason, especially that song. For those of you who do not know the lyrics to that song, I'm just going to read them to you really quickly. Just the verse. Give me one more reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Give me one reason to stay here, and I'll turn right back around. Said I don't want to leave you lonely. You got to make me change my mind. Baby, I got your number. Oh, and I know that you got mine. You know that I called you. I called you many times. Now, this occurrence obviously really traumatized Hannah to the point where she got PTSD from it 100%. So to put it into perspective for you, she believed in her mind, even though she knew it wasn't logical, that because Janet was at her house and she was encouraging her not to leave, that it was her fault that he had killed himself. She was also afraid that Jeff's family was going to find out and come kill her. But then strange things started happening to Hannah. So the following weeks and days, Hannah was changed. She went from being like a tough girl feminist to being absolutely terrified out of her mind every single day. She suffered from insomnia, which she still has to this day. She was convinced that there were demons hiding in every shadow. For a minute there, she felt like she went a little crazy. She threw out everything in her house that was witchy woo-woo. She started going back to being a Christian, which was how she was raised. She was filled with dread all the time, constantly filled with fear that something bad was going to happen to her. It was like fighting to control every little aspect of everything. She was afraid if she let up, even for a second, that it would cause something bad to happen to her. She then started taking care of Janet and her kid because she felt responsible for Jeff's death, and she felt like if she did not do this, again, that something bad was going to happen. For the first month or so, she could not tolerate the dark. She would sleep during the day, and she would leave the TV on, but on a church station, so that she could find some sort of peace. Still, every waking moment, she was terrified. Her and Janet had been friends since late 2008, early 2009. And to a degree, she felt like Janet was taking advantage of how she felt and was letting her feel that way and letting her take on this burden without any correction. And the crazy thing was, she had never even met Jeff in person. She had only spoken to him once on the phone when she had called to speak to Janet. Her grief and her trauma wasn't over losing someone in her life that meant something to her. Of course, she was upset that it happened, but how it affected her didn't make sense to her. It almost came like an oppression, and it changed her entire personality. As time passed, things started happening around her apartment. She started seeing shadows that would move and change shapes. She started having nightmares. When she would go to bed, her husband would have a white noise machine on that would make sounds of rain. She would be laying in bed and she would start hearing the sound of like an undertone of someone whispering under the rain. She couldn't distinguish words or sentences, but it was undeniably whispering. Other times there were disembodied voices where she would think that her husband was talking to her or saying something. She would answer him and he would look at her like she was crazy. He would say, "I didn't say anything," and then ask her what she was talking about. She felt like she was going crazy. So something that's important to the story is she's a formal correctional officer, and so she's been around weapons all her life. At one point, she took a 2-week vacation and she went to Texas to go visit her family. One of the family members that she visited was her favorite uncle. Well, she was at his house and they were just sitting at the dining room table chatting, and he was cleaning one of his guns. And she remembers that the thought actually went through her mind that her uncle Lonnie, a man who had half raised her, was going to use that gun to unalive her. She had to fight herself to stay put and not run out of there like a lunatic, she says. She said that he would never do anything to hurt her. She just felt this way because of the trauma that she had experienced. But after she went back to Anchorage, Alaska, things in the apartment got worse. At this point, they had been living in the apartment for about 4 years. She had never noticed this before. There was a strip on the floor that separated the living room and the kitchen. It was between the carpet and the tile. It was made of concrete. It went all the way between the 2 rooms and stopped where the living room extended to the kitchen and into the hallway. Messages started showing up in the concrete, not like scratched into it while it was still wet, but the pattern of the concrete itself was forming words. She pointed this out to both Janet and her husband, and they agreed that they could see it too. The first time it was just her name spelled out. There were other words, but they never made sense and they would just fade away. Her name was the only thing that didn't disappear and was still there until the day that they moved out. Another thing that happened is they were next door to a Hostess bread store, and sometimes she would walk over there to get stuff. Well, her husband's favorite thing to get from there was powdered sugar donuts with raspberry filling. One morning, she walks over there to grab him some of those donuts, as well as other stuff that they needed. She got home that night and she put the donuts in the pantry. Later on that night, her husband gets home from work and he wants to play Call of Duty and have a couple of donuts while she's making dinner. She opened the pantry door, and when she did, she was hit with this sour smell. The donuts were green and moldy. The pantry hadn't had a climate change, and the fact that the donuts spoiled, fresh donuts from a Hostess store, spoiled from that morning, is just unexplainable. There were a lot of things in that apartment that really freaked her out and were chilling, but there was one thing that was absolutely disturbing. It still gives her chills to this day. She's still unsure of what it was, and when she saw it, it scared the shit out of her. One day, she's at her house when she sees something that is about the size of a crow, but segmented like a body of a wasp. It was deep purple and maybe black in color, but the scariest part about it was its face was of a human. She was laying down, but she was not asleep. She was trying to go to sleep, but she was just laying down watching TV. And the way that she was laying is her door was open and she could see out into the hallway. And as she's looking at it, she has no idea where it materialized from, but it was just hovering in the hall outside of the door to the pantry. She locked eyes with this thing. She felt all the blood drain from her body. She felt pins and needles all down her spine, and just as quickly as she noticed it, it flew down the hallway towards the kitchen. She got the courage to get up and walk down the hallway to see where this thing went, and when she did, it wasn't there. It was just gone. All the while this is going on, she was trying to get through classes in art school. She had a little area in the living room underneath one of the windows where she did her work. She had a folding card table sitting underneath the window with supplies spread out in a spinning caddy. Next to that, but at the edge of the table, was a small bookshelf. That had 3 or 4 shelves. She also had large cans of paint for a sculpture that she was working on. These cans were stored there, so she had removed one of the shelves. She took the shelf out, she put it in the floor of the closet of the second bedroom. She decided to move the shelves around a little bit and bought new supplies, so she decided to put the shelf back. She looked everywhere, and not only was it not in the place that she put it, but she teared her entire apartment apart. It was just gone. She was really upset about this. She was really stressing about it because she didn't understand what was going on. So her husband was like, "You need a break." And he took her to Diamond Center Mall. They walked around for a little bit. They stopped and ate food at the food court, and they did a little shopping. After spending a little time there, they go back home. And when she walked through the door, not only was the shelf put back in its place, but all of the supplies that she wanted to put on the shelf were put on the shelf for her. No one lived with them. No one was visiting. She does not understand how this happened. They lived in that apartment for a little over 7 years before they moved back to Texas in 2012. And while lots of things occurred in that apartment, these are the most significant that she can think of right now. She still looks back on the situation and cringes. Most of the trauma that she felt, both mentally and spiritually, are now better. She's no longer triggered by being around guns, and she has now realized that Jeff's death was not of her doing, and that in fact, by her bravery of having Janet stay at her house instead of going home, it probably saved her life. And I will say that yes, Hannah, 100%, you did probably save Janet's life, because he was going to do that no matter what. I mean, you don't kill yourself just because someone doesn't come home. You have plans for that person. If you're going to kill yourself, you're going to do it. Like, that is not something that you just decide just in case someone comes home or not. That's not how it works. At least in my opinion. I think that death is pretty final. And when you have it in your head that you're going to do something like that, you're going to do it. And it is very likely that he was going to kill Janet as well. It would probably have been a murder-suicide, and I 100% think that you saved her life. I think that you did what any friend would do, any good friend would do. You sat up with her until 7 o'clock in the morning talking to her. You did ask her if he was going to do it. You were worried about it, and you expressed your worry. So that's you know, that means something. You did care whether he was going to do it or not, and she assured you several times that he was not going to do it. And honestly, even if he was going to do it, she didn't need to be there for that. Even if he was going to not kill her, she didn't need to see him do that. So all in all, you did the right thing 100%. In my eyes, there was no better thing to do than to keep her at your house, because not only do I think he would have killed her, but if he wouldn't have done it, he would have probably killed himself in front of her. And both scenarios are awful. Now, do I think that it is terrible that he killed himself? 100%. That is a horrific situation. And I feel so bad for his family. I feel so bad for Janet. And I feel so bad for you, because you suffered so much trauma that was not yours to hold on to. I said it before in the last video, and I will say it again. I am truly, truly sorry that you experienced this. It was absolutely not your fault. You portrayed concern for his well-being. You kept her safe by keeping her in your home. You had no idea what his intentions were. He was already being abusive towards her. What were you gonna... I don't think any good friend would have been like, yeah, you know, he's gonna kill himself, get out of here. He's been hitting you, get out of here. Go home to the abusive man that's threatening to kill himself and cocking a gun on the other side of the phone. Like, I don't think that was a safe situation for you to even have her go back. I'm not even going to use the word allow, because it's not like you were keeping her there. She has free will. She was able to leave on her own. You weren't forcing her to stay there. You were encouraging her to remain in a safe situation is what you were doing. So I hope that you understand that. I know that I said that before, but I wanted to repeat myself because it's so important that you know that you did everything right in this situation, at least in my eyes. And I would like my viewers to tell me what you guys think about that as well, because I bet I'm not the only one that thinks that. But with that being said, what do you guys think about this story? I think it's crazy how this whole thing happened. I think it's insane that she heard that song. That gave me chills when I read that part. Not gonna lie, it made me cry. Of course it made me cry. I am the biggest crybaby when it comes to that stuff. But it's not exactly that it made me cry because of like his death. While that was incredibly tragic, he was suffering from addiction. So he needed to get help for his addiction. He was clearly an alcoholic, right? But he was a suffering human being, and I'm not going to dismiss that. But what made me sad was the fact that this woman had gone through this abusive situation and had been manipulated, and then this was so final. This was like the most final betrayal you could do to somebody. This was one of the most evil things that you can do to someone besides taking their life, you know, or, you know, other things. But this is pretty terrible, right? And to hear that song afterwards is mind-boggling to me. And I just felt for her in that situation, and I felt for you. Like, having to hear that song, I felt for you, and that's what made me tear up. But what do you guys think about that song? What do you think about everything she experienced afterwards? Do you think that this was all trauma-induced, or do you think she was actually experiencing things? Do you think he was maybe haunting her? Do you think that maybe, you know, whenever you're in this vulnerable state, I feel like a lot of times demonic or evil entities, I don't think anything was demonic in this case, but I definitely think that negative energies were latching on to your grief and your trauma and were maybe playing on that a little bit, is what it sounds like. It was either that or it was a trauma response, in my opinion. But whether it was a trauma response or it was actually paranormal, either way, it is terrifying and horror. It's just so sad. It's horrible. And I just keep going on and on and on. I won't shut up right now. So I just want to know what your guys' thoughts are on this situation. I think the whole thing is crazy. So what do you guys think of that? What do you think about the song? And what do you think about what happened afterwards? Would love to know that. I am going to ask you, please be respectful. This woman has been through hell. This was very traumatic. So please be respectful in the comments. And with that being said, I'm now going to do my favorite part, which is the shout outs. My first shout out is going to Jamin Swanson. I appreciated your comment that you left underneath my video so much. Number one, congratulations on your recovery. That's absolutely amazing. And I appreciate that you appreciate that I talk about it. It's a very important part of my life, and I think it's important to talk about. And I appreciate so much that you made yourself vulnerable in telling me about that. I really respect that and loved that. I also really appreciated your kind words, and I love that you like my channel. It means everything to me. Thank you so much for your support, and I continue to look forward to you supporting me. Thank you. I can't say thank you enough. I am so appreciative of you. I know you're a new follower here, but I say this to all of my, I don't like to call you guys followers, all of my YouTube friends. I love you. My second shout out is going to 7DoveZ7. Thank you so much for acknowledging my hard work. I really appreciate it. And you said you've been a silent listener. Thank you for commenting, and thank you for telling me that you listen to my stories and that you like them. I appreciated that so much. And thank you for your kind words. Your support means the entire world to me. Whether you're watching and commenting or just watching, regardless, I feel lucky to have anyone watching my content. So when people comment and tell me things like you did, it means the whole entire world to me. So I just wanted to thank you so much and tell you that I love you. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories that you guys submit to me every other night on here. I'm doing it every other night again. So I hope you guys are happy about that. I know I took a little break for a second, but if you are into that, please hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified next time I tell a true scary story. Also, if you want to submit me a story, my email is kaisaspooky@gmail.com. It is in my profile and my description. And with that being said, I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? I need you to keep sending me your scary stories. I need you to have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much. See you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.